So anyway, will you repeat what you said about James Joyce?
Okay,
Quote.
so James James Joyce's autobiographical character Stephen Dedalus is collecting his payment from his from the headmaster of the school because he's a substitute teacher, and they conflict in their political ideals with Protestantism and Catholicism, and the whole colonialization of Ireland by the English.
Mm-hmm.
And the headmaster really has family ties to the English descendant.
Oh, so he's going to be on
Yeah.
the Protestant side,
Yeah,
and the Irish are going to be on the Catholic at
yeah.
that part of
But as Stephen is trying to collect his wages, the headmaster is trying to school him. You know, to try to say, "Oh, I'm higher up than
I'm
you
better
are.
than
Yeah,
you are.
I'm better
Yes.
than you are. Therefore, I know more than you."
That's
And
kind of common on Reddit,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. He wants, and they're talking about politics and history. And Stephen says, "History is the nightmare from which I'm trying to awake."
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very wise of him. In fact, it's only when he recognizes that can he, in fact, awake from it. But I really like your word history here because that word history actually points directly at the teachings of the Buddha, but the Buddha didn't have the word history. You use the word sankara, but he's talking about our past and the way that we construct our present is out of our memories of the past. So that we're almost bound to repeat the history because that's the mode that we're in, that it takes some waking up to be in the reality and make decisions now based upon the situation now, rather than relying upon our own personal history. But as we had begun to discuss, we can see that at very, very many levels. In fact, one of the things that you did for me was is that you put something a little bit deeper into the brain than I thought that they existed. And that is the whole quality of the herding mentality that we had talked about. The herding mentality I saw in mammals, but now you pointed to it. Know that that herding mentality is with birds also. That birds will go in a group together for safety, especially when they're taking off because they've heard a loud noise. Wherever they're going, they're all going together. They don't split and go everywhere. They just, they stay in the feather that flocks together. But birds are kind of sophisticated in their brain system. They're not very big, but they're really good at it. The thing that's amazing, though, for me is the issue of the fish. Because the fish also will herd together when they're in danger. And so we can see it. And in fact, I don't know if that's true, but it might be right down to the coronavirus level. Even things that are that simple may, in fact, be the source of this herding instinct. And perhaps even that's what gave rise to multi-cell animals, is that the herding instinct was right down to the cellular level. So it's really buried deep into us. But we know because it's a clear example of it being in fish. But we see it with the wildebeest. When there's a lion around, wildebeest is going to bunch together, herd up together. And humans do that too. If a husband and wife are walking down the street and there's no danger, they will separate and give each other some distance. Okay, maybe a foot or 6 inches or something. But if they hear a noise, they're going to be right together again. So that's an instinct that happens that's so fast that it's not even a thought. It's buried that deep into the mind. But then there's a further point of looking at that, and that is that when, like two cats or two raccoons who would normally fight rather than being close. If they're both cornered in the same place, cornered in an empty room or at the back of a cave or whatever, they in fact will cling hold of each other. That they would rather die in each other's arms rather than dying separately, and that's part of that herding instinct. But we can see it also in political parties, all the way up to very, very large organizations, as we spoke. The Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church are now finding common ground, and they're wanting to kind of combine and get together. Why are they doing that? The answer is for power, because they feel threatened that Christianity is dying worldwide. Since the 1950s, after World War II, Europe lost most of its Christianity. They still have quite a lot of it in the United States, but Catholicism is really hurting. Now, evangelical systems are hurting too, and part of that has to do with information, because there have been people together that were separated from each other. And when the printing press first got invented, the first thing it did was a Bible. That Bible got widely distributed, and then people could see the Bible itself as opposed to what the Catholic Church was saying. But there was another revolution that was posted with that, and that was the fact that after that first printing presses just became common all over the place, so that things began to be very cheaply printed. And so it wasn't the bull that Martin Luther nailed to the door in 1511 or whenever, but rather it was the fact that that bull was taken down, reproduced, and sent all over the place. And then the people who read that collected together. And that was the birth of Protestantism that caused a war that lasted 130 years, I think. In fact, the war's not over. Just a rough kind of, let us say, ceasefire. So we see this this quality that we have of instinctually gathering together and herding together. We would call that, within the context of the Buddha, is our attachments to rites, rules, rituals, and ways to do things. What's the right way to do it? And that what you helped me explain today is that goes really, really down deep into our genes. That's not something that humans came up with. That all the animals, in fact, each one of those fish in that school has to watch very carefully where the other fish are close to him, because they want to bunch together and still be able to swim. They don't want it just to be in a big gobbin that falls to the floor. And it's the same way with the birds. Each bird has to cooperate very closely and very carefully within his group. The same thing is true about the wildebeest when they are herded together, are bunched together. And then, in fact, that's exactly the reason why a sheepdog can herd sheep, is because of this nature of herding together, bunching together, and building a society. And so that society that humans have been able to build is extraordinarily complex. And that our herding instinct keeps wanting us to conform to that set of rules and rituals that we have built up over time with that instinct, so that we kind of get in the place of going along to get along. That we'll follow the herd. We'll go where we're told to go. We'll do what we're told to do, even though we're suspicious that we may not get a reward for doing what we're told to do, but we do have this instinct to do what we're told to do, this coming out of this herding instinct or this nesting instinct. I guess with the idea that if you get thrown out of the nest, if you don't conform to the rules of the nest, they'll throw you out, and then you're on your own. It's dangerous. That little monkey who was misbehaving got tossed out of the nest, and now he's on the jungle floor, and he is petrified with fear because it's dangerous down there. And so the next little monkeys are going to realize that they better do what they're told to do. And then you tick the clock a million years or less, and you've got human beings doing exactly the same thing. And it runs our lives until we wake up to that. This is actually what we're doing now is we're going into the details of what the Buddha would call one of the four modes of clinging. This is a mode of clinging, is our herding instinct. And I think that that's just brilliant that the Buddha knew all about this stuff, because we're, as humans now, just understanding this connection where the Buddha already knew about it. And it's a mode of clinging, and that mode of clinging is based upon the herding instinct that is actually at the base trying to avoid danger or trying to feel safe. And in that regard, then, that's an actually different instinct. That's the baseline instinct of the self-preservation instinct. Then we have, I would say, possibly the last instinct that got completely developed in humans, the way that it is the procreation instinct. And I'll tell you why in a moment. But we've already discussed a bit about the nesting instinct that gives rise to Silabhata Paramasa, our willingness to go along with a set of rules before we even know whether that rule is really valuable, wholesome, and appropriate or not. We do it because we're told to do it. There is a further instinct that is actually, I think, still mammalian, but I can see possibly that in the ocean that it can happen in more primitive life, and that would be the territorial instinct. In other words, this is my area. Wolves have it very strongly. Rhinos have it. Elephants, they have their own territory. Lions have it. If the lion pride gets really hungry and has to leave their territory, they probably will have to fight with before they join with the pride in the next area or the next territory. That it's part of the herding mentality, but it is the herd in the sense that this is my pride, this is my group, and that group over there is dangerous. This gives rise then in the human mind to many things that you would think quite interesting. Concepts mostly, that what humans have done is we have conceptualized our territorial instinct. Now, that territorial instinct is still there strongly. You can see it with humans when they build fences. Where they build that fence at their territorial boundaries, the one that they make up in their mind. Is so that fence is actually originated with a concept.
Same as countries, but that's where everybody's getting manipulated into believing that countries are real.
Right, that boundaries are real.
Yeah.
The boundaries are not real, but they're enforced, and in fact, they have to be forced by some government or agency or whatever. A fence, for instance, is there to enforce the boundary. And the reason that you need the enforcement is because everybody knows the boundary itself does not exist. It's not real. But you only have to enforce that which is not real. If it's real, then there's nothing to enforce.
Yeah.
And one of the examples of that would be an ocean. Now, that's a boundary. That's a real boundary. How about a ridge of mountains, high mountains? That's a boundary.